I brought in a guest speaker. I'm going to let him introduce himself.
How you guys doing? So my name's Alex Dailey. I graduated here in 2014. I was actually a part of Mr. Citron's first class here at Washington High, and I'm currently enrolled at Ohio State. And before we get started, I just want to tell you a little bit about my path from going from Masson to Ohio State. So to start off, I wasn't a great test taker throughout high school. Definitely was a hardworking student, definitely had my goals set and knew where I wanted to be. But test taking was something that I tend to struggle with, and I had to diversify myself in other ways to get myself where I wanted to be to go forth and achieve my goals, whether that was in sports or throughout the community or getting involved in different student organizations, whatever it may be. There's other ways to work around and build yourself up outside of the classroom. I think that's important to know before we get started today.
All right. So as you can tell, I brought in only the best for you guys. And after our exam that we had, and we struggled with it, I went back and through my memory, and you guys have worked on it. We've talked about this in class. And I thought, let me bring somebody who may have been in a similar position to you guys. 2011 is a long time ago for you, but for me and Alex, that's just like water under the bridge and just a good recent history for us. So I'm going to ask him a couple of questions, let him kind of just go through it. We'll clean this up as we need to. It doesn't have to be a perfect take, and we'll go from there. All right. So if you had to talk to these guys, and they'll just watch.
Yeah.
You're just watching now, all right? So if you had to talk to these guys and tell them, how do you prepare? How do you study? What's that point? Where do you go with that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the first step is to understand yourself and to understand your study habits. So one thing for me in particular is I tend to harp too much on the stuff I do know instead of focusing on what I may not know as well. So I think to start off, before you start studying, before you get your notebook out, before you start reading, reviewing, highlighting your notes, sit down and start and set up a plan. Figure out what do I know throughout this and what do I not know. So let's say the test is over chapters 1 through 4, and you know chapters 1 and 2 really well, but 3 and 4 are a little bit shaky. Make sure you spend more time on 3 and 4 than you do 1 and 2. Now, with that being said, make sure you understand the material in chronological order, because in the sense, especially in a biology class, you're going to need to know step 1 before you need to know step 4.
So how much time would you take to kind of set that plan up? How would you budget that?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think the easiest way to budget it is over a longer span of time. So I would say 4 to 5 days before the test takes place, I think would be the best way to do it. That way, you're not sitting at home, you're not spending 4 or 5 hours cramming the night before or 2 nights before. If you designate an hour and a half to 2 hours a night, and I know that sounds like a lot in total, you have 6, 7 hours, 8 hours of studying going on there. But if you think about it, when you break it down, it's really not that much per night, and all in all, you're going to understand the material better and probably get a better score on the test.
That sounds great. So plan that out a little bit, much like I gave you over all of winter break to prepare for your semester exam. I didn't tell you that part. I had the whole break to do it. All right, anything like when you start to put your notes together, do you have like a study guide that you make? Do you rely on your professors to put it together? How do you work in that way?
Yeah, absolutely. So it definitely depends. A lot of my professors do formulate a study guide, which does make it a little bit more convenient. Others don't necessarily make one, which makes it a little bit more difficult.
Sure.
And ideally, when you have a situation like that, you really have to harp on the textbook and get into the roots of the textbook to understand and truly get the details. Because I really do, this is something personally that I struggle with, is I hate reading. Absolutely hate it, don't like to do it. I'm a very slow reader, I always have been. It just took up too much of my time. But what I realized is when I break it down into little increments, like I said, over a 4 or 5 day period, that knowledge in the textbook, that in-depth analysis of what's going on really has helped me understand the material better, and it gets a broad enough understanding of it that I really feel like I have a little bit of knowledge of everything if I don't have a study guide to kind of guide myself off of. With that being said, I think any time that you're reading through a textbook or looking through your notes, utilize your teachers and ask them, they're going to give you some guidance, they're going to give you some insight, like, hey, this is probably going to be more of the test than another topic. And if you spent more time talking about it in class, that's probably another indication to say, hey, this is going to prioritize over something that we didn't talk about as much as well.
So do you find that you can harken back to your high school, but you find now in college that having gone through your lectures and then reading the book reinforces that material, or do you pick up new things, or is there a combination of both?
It's definitely a combination of both. But I like to read the text before going to lecture,
Oh, okay.
because that kind of gives me an understanding of what's going on, especially when you're in a college lecture sometimes. the material's fast. You have a 15-week period and you're cramming in a lot of material over that span of time. You're only in class 3 hours a week for most of the courses that you take. So if I read it beforehand, even if it's just a quick skim, maybe not even an in-depth read, I have a base knowledge of the understanding, the vocabulary, so I can make out what's kind of going on. Because the big thing that I think in lecture or in class, and this is not just in college but in high school as well, is you don't fully understand the material unless you're able to ask a question about the material. And the reason I say that is because a lot of the times, I'm like you guys, I sit here and I have no idea what's going on. I'm trying to formulate a thought and I can't think of something. So at that point, that's where you got to sit down, you got to talk to the teacher, you got to figure out exactly what you're missing there. Then there's times where, I'm asking a question, I don't fully understand the concept, but I know I have a good enough grasp that I can ask a question and I can understand it because I have a thought in mind already. And that's a good idea. We're not going to know everything the first time around, but if you can get a good enough generalized idea of what's going on, you're going to be all right in the long run.
Great. So when you pre-read before your lectures, which is something that we can totally do. I can set up all those things. We haven't done it, but you guys have your books. You have your online book. We can totally set you up with your pre-reading. In that pre-reading, do you take notes as you're doing that, or do you jot questions, or just highlight vocabulary? Or
a big thing for me, and this is the way I learn, everybody has their own way of learning, and it's something you have to work with, but I like to highlight. For me, reading and highlighting just for some reason grabs my attention. It really helps me understand things better, and so that's kind of what I do to go through the lectures beforehand.
Okay. So now can you talk just for a moment, because that's really a good idea about how you prep and how you prepare, not only for a day-to-day class, but also for the exams and tests. What happens if you don't do well?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's a lot of times, not only in high school, but in college as well, where I just haven't done that great on a test. And it's very frustrating, especially when you're putting in numbers of hours. Like I said, you guys have heard my study plan. I've spent 2 hours a night for 4 or 5 nights reviewing this material and trying to grasp it. And I get to the test, and sometimes you just get a little bit of test anxiety and you get yourself worked up and you don't do as well. But I think the biggest thing to focus on is understand that one test isn't the end of the world. And I have tests that are 40% of my grades sometimes, but I have to realize that I know I did whatever I could to put myself in a position to succeed on that test. And first and foremost, if you think about that and you understand that, that should ease your anxiety as a whole, because you know that you prepared, you know that you put yourself in a position, you really worked hard towards this. Now, unfortunately, sometimes life's just not fair, and you don't do as well as you wish you hoped to, and as much as you felt you worked towards. But at that point, you just have to realize that there's another opportunity coming, and you can't settle yourself for there. You just got to keep working, keep pushing through it, and understand that things are going to get better as long as you keep putting yourself in position, keep working hard, and stay focused.
So, if I remember correctly, my exam was one of the ones that kind of kicked you in the teeth.
Absolutely.
So you're not alone. You're in good
Definitely
company.
not alone, no doubt.
So, and that hasn't changed. Although the exam changes, I change it every time.
Right.
Doing that or experiencing that in high school, that give you some perspective, a little leg up? Do you feel like it was a valuable experience? And not trying to pat myself on the back. I just want to see, make sure that they see, and then, also for myself to get a sense of how that experience affected you.
No, absolutely. Definitely did, I would say, give me a leg up, because a lot of kids, they get into college, they take their first test, they go through the anxiety process, they don't do as well, and they're broken from the start. And that can deteriorate your whole semester. You don't have time to prep, you don't have time to plan, you don't have time to mentally prepare yourself. I think with the experience I had with Mr. Citron's class is, going through that at a young stage, I was able to kind of formulate these thoughts going forward that the more and more I did it, the more and more I realized that, hey, maybe this isn't the end of the world. Maybe there is a way to work around this, And even if you do fail a test, I'll tell you the number one thing to do, and this is something that I did with Mr. Citron, sit down with a teacher or get in your textbook and still learn the material. That material is going to be beneficial for you. Especially, I know that the test you guys took that was really hard was a midterm exam. So if you didn't do so well on a test throughout the semester, or this coming semester you don't do so well on a test, sit down with Mr. Citron or get it out in your textbook first and go through it and see if you can understand that material, and you're going to be better off in the long run. Like I said, you're going to have second chances, you're going to have third chances, especially when it comes to test taking. Especially when it comes to college, you're taking a lot of different classes over a 4-year span. So you're going to have different opportunities. So don't sell yourself short, just keep working, keep figuring it out, and you're going to be all right in the long run.
So I didn't share this with you, but we had as a class gone together and put in how the questions went. Did you make the mistake because they had just bubbled the wrong answer? pick the best wrong answer, or was it something they had never heard of before, which we ran into a couple of times, or was it something like, you know what, I knew it was on the test, I forgot to study it. So for you guys, just as you're in the perspective there, and for you, that kind of dissection going back to the exam and going through it would have value. Like what Alex is saying is that you have to be able to go in there and see what mistakes were you making and how you can move forward from that point. All right, I'm not going to take a whole bunch of his time because he's a college student who's here on break, chose to come in today to help me out. Tell him really what were you just doing last weekend? Just tell him real quick.
Last weekend, I went out west and was snowboarding on the slopes in Colorado for the first time. It was an amazing experience. I never experienced anything like it. My snowboarding was very rudimentary. I was strictly in Ohio, just on snow trails in Mansfield and in Zanesfield, in Mad River Mountain. And it's a totally different culture out there. Definitely wasn't just cruising down the hill like I expected to. Hit some bumps and falls first couple of days.
How much powder did you have?
We had 18 to 20 inches on Wednesday. They said it's supposed to be the best day of the year, so I definitely went out at the right time and definitely got to experience a good opportunity out there. So it was an awesome experience. I encourage anyone who is not interested or has not done it, skiing or snowboarding, try it. It's an awesome event. It's an also social event. Anybody can do it. You don't got to be a superb athlete or anything. I promise, you can go through with it and you'll enjoy and make the most of it.
Yeah, so your semester exam may not have gone well, and Alex may have failed in a test or two, but dude just skied 20 inches of fresh powder in Colorado. So if he can do it, you can do it. Alex, thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, this is great. Guys, we'll get this up here and we'll show it to you and put it available. And if you happen to know Alex Dailey or anybody in his family, say thanks to him and maybe even make a comment. We might even put this on YouTube, man.
Yeah, absolutely. And I just want to say, thank you for having me. Best of luck to you guys for the rest of the semester. If anybody wants to reach out to talk to me and extend this conversation, please do so. I'll leave my email with Mr. Citron. Feel free to shoot me an email at any time. I promise I'll respond. I'm not just pulling your leg here. I will respond. If you have any additional questions, I'd love to talk to you guys.
Yeah, Massillon alumni, you know where it is. All right. Thanks, Alex.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you.
All right. God, that's almost